Hello and welcome to the Monday show on Our Game. Delighted to be back after another bumper weekend. Shane Stapleton is resting up after Coola were sensationally booted out of the Dublin Championship. We're not sure if we'll ever see him again, but a very able deputy, Fintan O'Toole at the 42. Fintan, delighted to have you here. This show obviously is sponsored by OurGaretro.com. Go to OurGaretro.com, use the promo code OurGame for 15% off all the best retro jerseys in the business. Couple of little selections here. Lovely tip jersey, Galway, Wexford, Kilkenny, and this Limerick jersey that I have on here. Well, Fintan, another bumper weekend, wall-to-wall drama over the past 48 hours.
Yeah, we're really getting to that stage, second weekend of October, where, I think we Shane were chatting one stage here in August, and maybe here and then it's all in Verney. And we were saying, group stage matches, unless you're probably in the county and you're really invested in it, maybe hard to quite get the buy-in at a wider level to kind of really hone in on the talking point. But we're now at that stage where, you got a lot of county finals, you got semi-finals, you got a lot of big names exiting, you got big teams progressing, you got county stars in action. It's kind of the busiest month of it, and there's a lot to get stuck into and to chat about today.
We've plenty to chat to. Fintan, you might just have a quick, just your collar might be just affecting your audio a small bit, but we'll just we'll get stuck into it straight away. We're going to kick off with hurling. We'll chat a bit of football with Fintan as well. We're going to have Damian Lawlor on, a busy weekend for him, successful on both fronts with both Naas and his native Kilrowan. We'll start with the semi-finals. It was only one semi-final in Kilkenny, Fintan. A belter of a game here, and try as they might, Tullaroan just didn't have enough to get past Ballyhale. Ballyhale had too many aces in the pack. Finished Ballyhale 124, Tullaroan 120. Definitely no sign, Fintan, of their hunger and appetite slowing down here at all. Management change again. It's their third management team probably since Henry Shefflin's time, but it just keeps churning and churning and churning.
Yeah, that's the most impressive thing about it, is it just the consistency, and the personnel on the pitch stays the same. Well, maybe there's obviously a few changes on the sideline, but it's impressive as well, Verney, like the experience and the kind of guys that they're bringing in. Pat Hoban has a lot of experience in Kilkenny club scene. He has done Kilkenny intermediate and minor, I think, so we're obviously very well in touch with it, and it's just a continuation of obviously the great work that Henry did first and then James O'Connor. And they're now one game away from the 5 in a row, which would have eluded the great team that actually TJ and Colin would have played on, wouldn't they? The 2006-09 team. They didn't manage to do that in 2010. And in a county as competitive as Kilkenny, that is a pretty staggering level of consistency. And, even probably maybe more impressive this year, maybe given the after the hammer blow that was the way they lost that All-Ireland Club final in February. And maybe this is the benefit of the split season, that they had a long time to kind of process that and to kind of get back on the horse. And some of them obviously went to America for the summer. That would have been documented. Joey Holden and Colin Fennelly were in San Francisco. Maybe that time away, you're just a lot more re-energized then when you kind of come back in the autumn and you kind of get ready for another season, because this was obviously a really, really big challenge for them. An interesting game in the sense that it was the 2020 All-Ireland Intermediate champions against the 2020 All-Ireland Senior champions. And from Tullaroan's point of view, would love to get back to a Kilkenny senior final. And, I suppose 4 points in at the end, but just kind of following the scoring run and trends, it always seemed that it was that sort of gap in the second half once Ballyhale got the goal, and they were always that kind of 4 or 5 clear. And just like they've done to so many sides, they're able to kind of keep teams at arm's length. And they can win whatever way you want them to, Verney, like we've seen them absolutely destroy teams. I think it was the Dixborough final a couple of years ago, the 2020 final. They were unbelievably strong in that game. And then if it's a game like this, that's a bit tighter, that needs them to probably just kind of stay in control and stay in the driving seat, they're able to do that as well. And no time to rest now, straight out next Sunday in the Kilkenny final, which is it's actually the live game on TG Car. So that's a good hurling match, I think, for people to look forward to.
I think Joe Butler sums it up well here. Ballyhale simply have too many aces in the pack for other teams to overcome. Adrian Mullen had a very good game, but did not score. I think, he was quiet by his standards on the scoreboard, but was on the ball an awful lot. So many holes that Tullaroan had to kind of plug here, but they really, really threw it down to them in fairness, and they beat them, or they were close to beating them in a group game in the COVID Championship in 2020, and very close again. They're definitely a common team. The likes of Garrod done, they have a serious spine. Tommy Walsh, obviously Pádraig Walsh hurled very well. Mossy Keown, Shane Walsh, Martin Walsh, and Tommy as well. Tommy Senior, they're definitely a common side, but this will be a hammer blow for them, because I think they thought they had a good chance of potentially pulling off an upset here. Joe Butler just says here as well, they average about 27, 28 points in most games. At club level, that is just so hard to handle, and it's it's like you're trying to stop one or two guys, and you might, and TJ might be quiet in a game, and then you have Colin, then you have even the likes of a Joey Cuddihy, Niall Shortall, and a new player coming in this year. There's so many different ways they can hurt you, and it looks like they've taken that All-Ireland Club final defeat, stung by it, and are absolutely mad to go and do 5 in a row in the 50th anniversary of the club. And I'm sure they won't say it publicly, but I'm sure they'd love a crack at Ballygunner again down the road. And that would be, to me, like last year's All-Ireland Club final was a brilliant game, and it was the two big hitters. But that's as close to me, if they were to meet again, that's as close as they're going to get to a club game being given probably the build-up that a county game would get, a big county game, because that would be two of the biggest hitters going at each other. I'm saying that they have the Village to overcome first, and obviously the Village really threw it down to them in that belter of a semi-final 2 years ago, real high-scoring game as well, and we're lucky to come out the wrong side of it, so that's going to be a fascinating final. Richard Hogan, obviously based in Kilkenny as well, he just said Tullaroan missed a few chances in the third quarter, which would have brought them closer. I think to beat Ballyhale, you either have to do what Ballygunner did and give them no chance to respond by literally getting a sucker punch at the end of the game, or maximising your chances, because they just on the balance of play, they have the class that's going to come back at you. Richard just says here as well, Colin at 11 will pose a problem for the Village. I believe Colin and TJ switched at different stages, and they've great flexibility in that regard as well. Their main men can play anywhere. Adrian Mullen can play anywhere, probably between 8 and 15. Colin Fennelly can switch between probably 14, 12, 11 and 10, and even if in the corner if needed as well. So just a quick one here from Richard as well. Couldn't see Cian Kenny being able for him, to be honest. So Cian Kenny plays centre back for the Village. We'll probably go into that game a little bit more in Thursday's preview show, but that's a fascinating final. As you said, Fintan, going to be on the box at the weekend. We'll go through Tipperary a bit closer with Damian Lawlor later in the show. It's obviously going to be a local derby final there, Killadangan against Kilrowan, but we'll come into more detail on that in a while. So one of the reasons Shane Sable is not on today's show is Nafina 218, Kula 17 points. We'll just focus on Kula for a second, Fintan, because you would have to say in the last couple of years that the wheels have come off a little bit. A side that was obviously back-to-back All-Ireland champions, they were beaten by in that game by St. Mullins, and it doesn't look like they've really, recovered really from that. They obviously won another county title under Willie Matter in 2020, but they've been beaten the last 2 years now. And for the aces they have available to them, albeit Con missing at the weekend, you'd have to say they've probably really underachieved the last couple of years.
Yeah, I get the point you're making, but I think you talk to anyone in Dublin hurling, the consensus was that Na Fianna have been the common side for a long, long time, you know, with the amount of guys that they have playing underage for Dublin in various teams. And then obviously someone like Donald Burke has become such a big mainstay for the Dublin seniors. Liam Rush has become available to them. Even Conor McHugh, who's better known obviously as a Dublin footballer, corner forward. I could be wrong, but I think he's is he the only dual player that's starting for both the Fianna sides? He's playing full back, but I mean, he has Dublin underage hurling experience. I'm not 100% sure on this, but I presume when he was with the Dublin senior footballers, his ability to be involved with the hurlers was lessened. So he hasn't been obviously involved with the footballers as much in recent seasons. The last couple, so he's obviously been a huge boost, you imagine, to the hurlers, having him available full-time to them. And, you know, that just kind of hunger, I guess, of a young side on the rise. I mean, Cool have done it all, you know. They obviously, majority of the team, 2 All-Ireland club medals in their back pockets, and as you say, a good few counties as well. Trying to get back there is kind of a difficult thing. And, you know, okay, Na Fianna aren't the reigning champions. That's Ken McCud, but I wonder, there has to be a big drive in that camp, given the way that final was. Not so much the loss in extra time, but the way that the match ended level at the end of normal time in last year's Dublin County final with the Ronan Hayes goal, and that they didn't manage to close that out. And I think it's an impressive kind of show of, I guess, of resilience and of character that they've managed to come back and kind of get back to the Dublin final, and they have the chance in 2 weeks' time against Kilmacud, and that's a pretty unique situation. I don't know what's been done before. I think someone saw someone tweet last night that I think Vincent's and Crave Kieran in the 70s had it, but the 2 clubs are meeting in the 2 county senior finals in the same year in that county. I know that there's very few dual players between them both, so it's not like a Lockmore Castleiney situation with a huge crossover, but it is still pretty notable and pretty striking, you know. But I suppose once they got the 2 goals early in yesterday's game, it looked like they kind of had too much for Coola, and I think they just need to kind of cap off all this kind of progress that they've made now by getting that county senior title breakthrough.
Yeah, the pitches in Na Fianna, I know they have plenty of them in Na Fianna and Crokes, but they're getting some traffic nearly every night of the week, especially, as you say, with like the vast majority are different bodies. It's a really unique situation. Just on Coola, before we go away from Coola, Joe Butler just says, did Con play for Coola? He did not. He was injured. What the nature of the injury was, I'm not 100% certain, but the way somebody close to the Dalkey camp described it to me was as the Coola management were handed the keys of a Ferrari, but they were unable to keep the car on the road. That's the way it was described to me. But it is disappointing.
I won't guess who your source is that was close to the Dalkey camp, you know.
Fintan, you know, as journalists, we have many sources, so I would never reveal my source either. But it is definitely disappointing for them, because that kind of golden period may have slipped past now. The chance to get another Leinster, the chance to face. I always wanted to see how they get on against Ballyhale in Leinster. It would have been a real kind of a dream match. It's not going to happen now. And fair play to Na Fianna, because they were in trouble earlier on in this year. They were teetering on, been in a relegation clash at one stage, and they've turned things around really well now, allied with the fact that they've been able to get their best hurlers back on the pitch again, which has been crucial.
I think they had a good few in the States, as far as I know. I think maybe the Currys. So yeah, that is a kind of a big thing to kind of come back into it, you know. But it was just striking, I suppose, the scoreline at halftime. There were 10 points in it, you know. I mean, like, you're still looking at a lot of big names in that Coola side, and obviously a guy like Liam Murphy, I'm kind of impressed with him when I've seen him underage for Dublin. Like, he hit 3 first half points, so I think that was another, I suppose, young guy that's kind of come into the frame to kind of give them another little bit of a boost. But 10 points down at half time, and when they didn't manage to get a goal in the second half, you know, it's always going to be a difficult case to try and kind of reel them in then.
Really strange one with one of the Na Fianna goals, where the keeper was basically allowed to, I'd say, dawdle out to the 45, launch a ball into the edge of the square, a little flick on it, ended up in the back of the net. Just a real kind of strange one, because we've obviously seen keepers score from distance in Parnell. Parnell's not the biggest pitch, and just the fact that he was that kind of saunter up the pitch like that was a strange one. A team kind of sitting back. Yeah, just thought it was a strange one, but 2 really disappointing years for Coola. There's no point in saying any different. We've already touched on the other semi-final. It was Kilmacud Crokes 121, Ballyboden 15 points. Boden actually started really well in this. And a lot of their big players, Conor Dooley, who's obviously we probably know better as a goalkeeper, he was playing wing forward and he was very, very effective early on. Paul Ryan looked very dangerous early on as well. They had 6 points on the board early, and Crokes just really, really turned the screw. It was fascinating to see. This was obviously on RTE the other night. It was fascinating to see the difference in the use of a sweeper between two teams. So I think it was Simon Lambert that was sitting back, kind of playing the sweeper for Boden, and he was kind of planted around the D and he was really protecting. Whereas Crokes, the sweeper changed from time to time, but the sweeper was fluid in the sense that they used the sweeper to come forward every chance they could. A +1, Joe Fortune kept referring to him as, and they were using him going forward, not just as an extra defender. And, Crokes have a very young side. A lot of names missing even from last year. I think they had 4 or 5 of their maybe more experienced players from last year that are missing this year. Really young side, and they've settled in really well. I thought this was really impressive. Alex Considine got a great goal before the break. He's a real poacher in around the goals. The ball kind of hopped and he snapshot to the net. Finn McGarry was after making a brilliant save from Ronan Hayes a few minutes before that. But I'd say from 20 minutes onwards, Crokes really dominated here. I think it's only Brian Sheehy that is togging out for the Kilmacud footballers. But this is a fascinating one, really. It'll be some crack around those two clubs over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's a pretty kind of, as I said, it was really kind of a unique situation. The fact that it isn't a huge amount of players on both sides involved just takes away from it slightly, if you know what I mean. Like, it's kind of more a thing, I suppose, for the general clubs and the supporters and all that. And I suppose it's Kilmacud are the champions, obviously, in both, and they're the ones that have won both these titles kind of recently enough, not just last year. Whereas in Fianna, this is a huge thing in both codes to try and get a title, because, as I said, not only have they had the underage progress in the hurling, but they've also had it in the football, and they've had guys, playing in Dublin sides, and that's always kind of the barometer, isn't it? You start seeing Dublin minor under 20, or sorry, whatever county you're looking at the minor 21, under 20 setups. You're seeing guys from the same club. I know what you, but then that always kind of draws me to kind of start looking at, well, this club is going to start making an impact at senior level now pretty soon enough, But just one thing that struck me on Saturday night was just the spread of scorers. I thought it was really good from Crokes. Like, you had 8 scorers in total, but just, it wasn't a case of like one guy getting 12 or 13 points, or from the outside, I suppose, we're probably looking at Ronan Hayes a lot, when we think of his exploits last year for them, Kilmacud, and you're thinking of Dublin, but, he gets 2 points, and not that he's ineffective or anything, but he's getting a lot of support. When you look at Dara Purcell, Fergal Whiteley, Fiona Callig, 3 points each. Constantine, who you mentioned, get 1-1, Davy Crowe 2 points, and Free Take Rushing O'Rourke get 6 points. That's kind of a nice spread. And again, I just think every club always has a bit of a cause. Everyone kind of has an angle that they can get at, and we don't know, I suppose, outside the dressing room what it is. But if I was the Kilmacud camp, I wonder, is it to have a cut off that Leinster hurling the way that they lost that game?
Yeah.
A dirty wet night down in Portlaoise last year, and they got overturned by Clough-Balacalla, who obviously are fine side. And I think were you at the Laois final last week, so you would have obviously seen them up close and know kind of what they're about. Like, but you win one county, and then I think in a side like in a club like Crokes, when you're looking at the footballers being so successful in Leinster and All Ireland, is there a bit of envy? Is there a case if we want a bit of that and they want to have a go off it now and try and maybe kind of journey further in the Leinster Championship and kind of see where that takes them? Obviously, first of all, they got to get past Na Fianna, and that's not going to be an easy task in their form yesterday, But definitely was just kind of a mature performance. I thought the way they kind of dominated that second half and kept Boden at bay.
Can they do it on a wet Tuesday in Stoke? That's the question. They definitely will. I feel like they left that behind a bit. I think they were stunned a bit by Clough. I think there was a bit of an ambush waiting for them in Portlaoise last year. They probably didn't. They didn't think they were going to get what they did, but they definitely looked like they're on a bit of a redemption mission there.
I just checked it there. Actually, it's interesting. Dublin are playing Laois in Dublin be the Laois champions in the quarterfinal. Sorry, I hadn't realised that. So that's that's going to be pretty interesting. I presume in the fact I'm looking to hear the fact that Dublin are first name, does that mean it's Parnell Park this year? So it could be interesting to see for whoever it is, Kilmacud or Na Fianna. If Kilmacud managed to get the chance to get a rematch against Clough, I'm sure they'd relish that.
Yeah, the Leash boys were well aware of it within a couple of minutes of the final
Okay.
whistle, and so they kind of think there's potential opportunity anyway. Again, and they again, you have two teams with a bit of a point to prove. Because Balacalla were definitely hurt even from that Leinster final defeat last year. Such a brilliant year up until probably 20 minutes into that Leinster final, and then the wheels came off. Niall Heffernan just says, well, lads, first half of Crokes v Ballyboden was high quality stuff, fizzled out in the second half, unfortunately. The first half was brilliant stuff, yeah. Crokes kind of, just towards the latter stages of the first half, started to dominate. They're really fit, mobile side. And they had a nice little buffer at half time, and they extended a bit in the second half. Then James S. Saint hiding again. He may get used to it with how bad Tip are at the moment. With a bit of luck, James, he'll be hiding a couple of Mondays next summer. But you just don't know.
I presume for him now, this Tip County final is like, two north sides, and neither of them being bars as well. He's probably hoping both, if there's a way that both could lose, this is a bit of a nightmare final pairing from his point of view, is it?
Yeah, probably. Even though he'll try and say that he's like somehow a win for the North, but I think deep down we both know what the truth is.
Yeah.
Niall Heffernan just comes in here. Some very good young players coming through for Crokes. Micheál Donoghue has something to work with, assuming some of those guys keep playing hurling. He's definitely, he has a couple of he's going to have a couple of high profile absentees anyway, with Chris Crummy and Cian O'Callaghan not around. Owen O'Donnell quickly jumped in from helping Whitehall Colin Kill to a Dublin 2 final on Saturday evening to do an RTE coverage, and then was very quick to say that he's a hurler through and through, and that he never turned his back on the hurlers. He just took an opportunity when it arose. So he'd be delighted to have him on board. But definitely a lot of really good young guys with the Crokes, and as you say, Finto, there is a great spread, and they have a lot of talent across the pitch, I have to say. Just a question in here from Pure Hatchet for you, Fintan. Fintan, any news on new players in with the Cork hurlers next year? Has there been any rumours of any sort of a squad put together yet?
Yeah, so I suppose there's kind of nothing kind of finalised and familiar, but I suppose the thing that is just catching the eye like at the moment is just kind of how guys are doing in the club scene, and kind of what that means. Some guys that have been there before. This is my obligatory mention of some Cork club game, which obviously kind of confuses Saint every weekend, but basically we had the County Senior A final in Cork yesterday. So that's the level below what Blackrock and Finbars have been operating at. So Father O'Neill's won it. They had lost the last 2 finals. They beat Corsie Rovers. And I suppose the 2 guys have kind of stood out on opposite sides. Declan Dalton has been playing outfield for Father O'Neill's. He's obviously had his injury problems the last couple of years. He's been on the fringes of Cork senior sides, played league, played some championship as well, obviously in 2021. So whether he'll get a kind of an extended run will be interesting. Sean Toomey was playing for Corsie Rovers yesterday. It's quite good when they were going well in the first half. He got 4 goals in their semi-final win. And again, you're looking at, the guys that Pat Ryan has worked with at under 20. I think that's the big interest to see where that they're going to go. So he's a guy. And then to throw a quick few names at you for next weekend, which is obviously the main final in Cork, the Premier Senior. Robbie Cotter is a guy that's been really, really impressive for Blackrock. Again, he was on the 20 teams with Pat Ryan. And then there isn't any clarity on this, Verney, but the big interest from the St. Finbar's point of view is the guys who are very talented at a couple of sports. Are they going to commit to hurling? So Brian Hayes is one, who's a Cork senior footballer this year, has been brilliant in bow codes for St. Finbar's into senior championship this year. There's, much like Owen O'Donnell committing to the hurlers, there's no indication yet that he is not going to be committing to the footballers next year, but it is a subject of discussion, which one, both managers would love to have him. And then Ben O'Connor, who was the Cork minor captain 2 years ago, but is a very, very promising rugby player, would have played for the Ireland schools team last year, played in the Munster Senior Cup final. As far as I know, he is still only in his leaving cert this year, so he still has schools rugby to go, but he was a guy, for a guy in minor, and obviously looking at minor now being under 17, it's obviously a huge jump up, but he has made the move very, very quickly. So whether he will be involved, I'm not too sure because his school commitments. And
Ben O'Connor is still leaving cert.
I think he is. I'm pretty sure that
size him, physically, he's an absolute beast. To me, he's the prototype modern inter-county hurler footballer.
Yeah, and he's taken to the county senior scene, club scene very, very well this year, and obviously they're in the final now. I suppose it's a real kind of a strange quirk of fate. The last 2 Cork minor hurling winning captains, Tomás O'Leary 2001 and Ben O'Connor 2021. Obviously, Tomás O'Leary went on to have a hugely successful rugby career at Munster, and obviously rugby is a kind of a big patch for Ben O'Connor at the moment, so whether he'll come into it. But if I was to pick one, I'd say from the club scene at the moment, actually, I think Ethan Toomey, again, another guy that Pat Ryan has been looking at. He's been really, really impressive for St. Finbarrs. So I think the Examiner is streaming that game live next Sunday. I think that would be an interesting one to see. Look, it's like any county, Verney. Like, I think when you have a couple of underage sides that have done well and their manager comes into it, and it's a really interesting pathway, I think, managerial-wise at the moment. If you look at the last 3 All-Ireland under-20 winning managers, Pat Ryan, Liam Cahill and Derek Ling have all got county senior jobs with those counties now this year. So I'd be very interested to see kind of team sheets next year, how much of the Tip 20s, how much of the Kilkenny, how much of the Cork. I presume you saw there was a bit of chat yesterday how good Jerome Cahill was for Kilruane, and Damian better able to talk about this, but I'm not sure what his situation is, but like whether he will be kind of in the frame for the senior side or not. But that's obviously one they're looking at, and how many of the guys Derek Ling is going to bring through. And obviously the benchmark, like everything at the moment, is Limerick, and what Kylie did with the 2015 and 17 sides and how they continue to be the kind of benchmark. So I'd say there'll be an interesting feature for us next spring, when we kind of look at team sheets for a couple of weeks and we kind of see who from those 20 sides, Ling, Cahill and Ryan respectively, have kind of brought into the frame.
Yeah, and that ability to coax a guy that you've had success with at underage can't be understated. And they know his form, shall we say. And they know, like some guys, not being smart, some guys need a little bit more leeway than others. That's just the nature of it. That's what management is all about. So it'd be interesting.
And not just that, it's just interesting that Cork and Kilkenny, both Derek Ling and Pat Ryan, have brought members of their management team in with them to the senior setup. So, we don't know this situation. I'm just speculating, but you could have a situation, a player got on very well with a selector at under 20. He just forged a relationship and there was kind of a connection there. Then he sees this guy involved in the senior setup. You don't know. I'm kind of speculating there.
No, but you aren't, because how many times have you seen a guy, such and such took over a team, he asked me to stay on, I couldn't not stay, you know what I mean? An elder statesman or something like that. So I do think relationships like that and knowing guys' form and that kind of thing is huge.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting that both of them have kind of opted for that kind of setup. I'm sorry, in fairness, Cahill has as well, in terms of his absolute, sidekick and right-hand man. Bevins has come with him, so I presume that's another factor for some of these tip players that have been exposed to and had such huge success with Bevins' coaching and Cahill's management across 18-19 with the 2021 and go back further in the 16 minor team.
Yeah, just a quick, Richard Hogan just says Ben O'Connor is 100% in sixth year in PBC. He'll play senior cup rugby this year. He's going to be a busy boy. He needs to be well managed as well. Niall Heffernan just says Ben O'Connor is exactly what Cork seniors need. Big, mobile and very physically aggressive. Unbelievable that he's only doing his LC. He definitely needs to be managed very well, because he's going to have a lot of traffic through his legs. Fintan, you're on the spot here. Porter. So the Cork hurling famine could end next year. I'm sure no one would like it to end more than you.
Yeah, I think when you actually look at that kind of question, you always have to look at as regards who are the champions. And I think it's you're asking, can Cork win it? Well, that means that Limerick would have to lose it. And I think right now it's very, very difficult to see. You just have to be objective about it, and see the team that have won the last 3 All-Irelands. Obviously it's Kilkenny were stopped eventually, and obviously the Dublin football was stopped eventually, but we're living through the third, I think, really, really dominant period that probably we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years at the moment. You look at Cork the way they were in 2021, but how much they were beaten by Limerick. It's difficult to see the gap being closed that quickly in that short space of time.
Yeah, just the last one on Cork, Finto, is Toomey from the Bars playing football as well?
Yeah. So he's bought into their football setup this year, but he's just been really, really impressive. I think as a kind of a midfielder for the hurlers, just kind of linking play, is able to take a score. I'm trying to think of maybe kind of a player, maybe a little bit kind of like a Darragh O'Donovan in terms of kind of spraying the passes and able to take the score. Obviously that's a high standard to be kind of reaching, but definitely he just looks like he's a lot of potential now. But with these things, then it's going to be interesting to see whoever wins next week. I mean, Robbie Cotter is another one that I would mention. I thought he's been excellent. Alan Connolly is probably a bit more familiar to people. So on both sides, Blackrock and St. Finbarrs have guys that I imagine will be in Pat Ryan's thoughts, not will be in Pat Ryan's, are in his thoughts already.
Beautiful segue into the Limerick Hurling Championship, because I saw Darragh O'Donovan put over an absolutely beautiful line ball as Doon booked their place in the semi-finals. So two very tight semi-finals here, and definitely an upset in one. It was Doon 120, Kildimo Pallaskenry 19 points, and in the other quarter final, this sounded like a bit of a dour affair, but a brilliant result for South Liberties. Finished South Liberties 113, Patrick's Well 14 points. This is the first time since the B Championship linked in with the A that someone from the B has beaten one of the big hitters in the A, and it's the first time I think in 6 years that it hasn't been the Well, Doon, Kilmallock, and the Piershig in the semi-finals. Just to focus on South Liberties for a minute, Finto. This is an absolutely huge win for them. I know your fellow Corkman Anthony Nash is involved with them. He's obviously involved with the 42 as well. But this is a massive, massive win. And I'll be straight, I thought if there was going to be an upset that it would have been in the other quarter final, even though the Well had been kind of struggling this year without Keane Lynch. But a huge win for South Liberties.
Yeah, I was up last year at the quarterfinals, Verney, and like Liberties, I can't remember what the margin was in the end against extra time against Kilmallock, but they took Kilmallock, the eventual champions, to extra time. And like in Barry Nash is obviously the main standout, but another guys like Brian Ryan, Thomas O'Brien, and just the way they were coached. I think Brian Ryan Senior is involved in management, and Anthony Nash is kind of doubling up as goalkeeper and coach. You know, they seem to have a good setup, good bunch of players coming through. It's interesting the way they deploy Barry Nash, you know, cornerback for the Limerick Seniors, but he plays in the half-forward line. They just try and get him involved and get on the ball as much as possible. So they weren't that far away last year from causing a big shock, or sorry, a surprise, I guess. And in terms of kind of disrupting that fairly established semi-final order, as you talked about it, I would have just thought that the thing was just going to be levelled by the fact that Keane Lynch was out of the frame here for Patrick's Well. You know, look, it's just incalculable, really. Like if he was out for Limerick, you know, you saw this year how at times, you know, teams came back, teams challenged them so strongly. I mean, at club level, that's just kind of enhanced all the more, you know. So, but I think it was good for Limerick hurling. Not that probably they need much kind of boost or anything like that, but in the club scene, it was good that I think you had two competitive quarterfinals this weekend, and that's South Liberties won, and the Kildimo Pallaskenry were very competitive. You know, I was doing a piece last week and chatting to their Sean Cuddy. He would have been their club secretary the last couple of years, and you know, he was just saying like this is huge for them, the strides that they've made since the two clubs came together. And it was the first time in 80 years that a team from the parish had contested a knockout stage game at the top level of the Limerick Senior Hurling Championship. And again, it just seems in both cases over the weekend, I think it was Dean Coleman got the goal for Doon. That was the vital score. They win by 4 points. And I was looking at the highlights. Streamsport were tweeting out some highlights from different club games that they were doing last night. And looking at the Limerick or the South Liberties game, just when they got that goal, Brian Ryan actually got it, who had been very successful for Limerick underage teams in Ardscoil Reach. That was a big moment for Liberties. There's actually a great moment in the commentary where it's a point up in Kilmallock. I think it's Johnny Keogh was on it, and he's kind of shouting at like Thomas Ryan, or you know, to kind of mind the ball, kind of protect it as he's coming out of.
I saw that. Yeah.
And next thing he launches over this brilliant point. And in fairness, like you know, it's the insurance score, but it was an absolute brilliant score. I think he was. Was he in Dublin for a while? I think he was.
He was with Cooler for a while.
Yeah. So, and again, I think he's Limerick experience. Like that's, you know, it's a decent kind of a forward line when you've Brian Ryan, Barry Nash, and him floating around the place, you know, and that's just a big landmark for them now. And then you're playing the Piershig now. I think they're on next weekend. Not 100% of that. And then obviously the other semi-final is Doon and Kilmallock. But whereas the two sides in the semi-final have looked very, very strong this year. You know, they look like they have a lot of kind of aces to pack, especially Kilmallock. I think that the amount of guys that they come back to something we're talking about at the start about kind of guys, the amount of guys you see on a county minor 20 team. It's interesting the amount of guys in Kilmallock pushing their way into the Limerick 26 this year. I know Graham Mulcahy's the main one, but you know, Shane O'Reilly, Robbie Hanley, Aaron Costello, all kind of breaking into that 26. Micheál Hoolan,
yeah.
I mean, a year exposed to that kind of high performance environment, Paul Kinnerk's coaching, Kylie's management and all that, like what's that done for their hurling at club level, you know? So yeah, but a huge thing for South Liberties, I'd imagine. And there was a nice interview with Brian Nash. He was just talking about, like, you know, this is a magical feeling, and you're listening to him, and he's a guy that's won it all over the last couple of years. He is a hurler of the year nominee, isn't he? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, just thinking off the top of my head, but like the joy in his face that like first time since 1985 getting into a county semi-final clearly meant a lot.
It's great to see it. I was down in Wicklow yesterday, the Wicklow football final, and you just see, I just love the raw emotion, and it's just I just find it hard to beat this time of the year, even though the conditions are horrible. It's so raw and personal, even to these county players to go back and say, you know, what's the highlight of your career, and they could have 6 or 7 medals in, All-Ireland medals in their back pocket, and they could talk about a quarter-final win, or they could talk about some sort of a win with the club, which I just think is brilliant. Niall Heffernan just says here as well, have to go back to work unfortunately, but speaking of freakish young lads, Shane O'Brien tortured an Pearshig full back line when they played in the group, was physically able for Casey, which is mad. Yeah, an absolutely brilliant
some prospect. Yeah, I
Isn't
think we
he?
want to say the same thing at the same time there, but he is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, like, I was thinking, like, under the old system, and under 17, you'd have just thrown him in straight away, and he would have been on the probably close enough to the team, starting the team last year. But for a team that won the county and got to a Munster club final, obviously, okay, I know Ballygunner were superior on that day, but given how strong they were last season, what a boost to be pitching a guy like that into your forward line to kind of freshen it up for this year, But just wanted to go back to what you were saying, kind of about the kind of county thing, like, without getting into probably what is probably getting a little bit almost boring and tiresome at this stage, yet another split season debate. Like, I just think one thing must be a great buzz for the county player to have a period of uninterrupted time with his club colleagues, and to get that kind of that momentum and that kind of solidarity and that kind of, I suppose, familiarity back with your teammates, and I presume it must be great for Nash that, because I've talked to county players over the years, and people would have said there's almost a bit of a guilt. You play a county championship game in April and then you're gone for the summer and you're the one holding the whole thing up, whereas at least now you're in with it and you can have a good crack off it and you can give it everything for that, whatever amount of time you're in the club championship. And then at least, okay, if it doesn't work out for you, but at least the system probably kind of facilitated you, and I do think that is a big thing. And for the club players as well, like, we chat to, presume you probably see it, chatting to different guys in different clubs, they just think it's great having, uninterrupted access for this section of the year with their star players.
I just think the word you used there was guilt, and I do think I was chatting to Colin Collins a few weeks ago, and he just says, like, you just don't have club managers on to you about players now. They don't, because they know they're going to have them, when they have them, and that's not really a problem. The only players that they'd be on to is maybe someone on that's maybe outside of 26 to play a league game the morning of an inter-county league game or something like that. But I think it's great that it's uninterrupted, definitely. Niall Heffernan just says there as well, the Well have been there for the taking this year. They had a load of crazy wides in the first half. The Liberties dug in and fought like animals in the second. Yeah, an absolutely huge win for South Liberties there. I think the semi-final draw is South Liberties against the Pearshig. That's on this Saturday. They're going to have to cause another upset, I'd say, to stay going there. And the Pearshig look like men on a mission. And the other semi-final is Doon against Kilmallock. I definitely say more of a 50-50 game. Obviously, Kilmallock are reigning champions there, so that's going to be two fascinating semi-finals this weekend. There were two brilliant semi-finals in Clare over the weekend. We'll start with Saturday's game. Finished Ballier 24 points, Cratloe 117. This is a brilliant win for Ballier, especially considering they lost Gerard Guzzi O'Connell after about 15 or 16 minutes, I think. Tony Kelly was brilliant in the first half, probably a bit quieter in the second half, but a very, very good first half. Gary Brennan made a huge difference when he came in. Such a good ball carrier, particularly at club level. They were really efficient in front of the post. Both keepers made some great saves in this. Tony Kelly's penalty was saved, and then there was a double save by the Ballier keeper. Don't know if you saw much of this. I know the buff was down in Cusack Park on Saturday, but Ballier are a really difficult proposition at club level, Fintan. Real teak tough team, and to survive and probably thrive 45 minutes without a man is a fair testament to the quality they have.
Yeah, what I really admire about them, Verney, is their consistency. I remember when they won the first county in 16, there was maybe you might have been at it, but there was a press day before the All-Ireland Club final then, 2017, and Tony Kelly was at it, and he was just unbelievably, I suppose Tony Kelly does a lot of these kind of press events, but he was just unbelievably relaxed and really seemed to enjoy this one because he was talking about Ballier, it wasn't Clare. But one quote that stuck in my mind was that he just said, "This is our chance. For the likes of us, we won't be back here again. This is our one shot at it." I know they haven't got back to an All-Ireland final since, but the fact that they have come back and won counties again and got the Munsters again, I think is really, really impressive. Now, I suppose geographically there is a thing, the fact that where they're situated, they do have footballers at their disposals from neighbouring clubs, and that's a quirk just of Clare GA in general. Ina Kilmona would have been similar, Kilmaley, those clubs in that kind of divide between the kind of east and the west of the county, they afford the opportunity. But the way that they've just, you say Gerard O'Connell, who you mentioned, who got sent off, he had spent a couple of years in Australia, and they obviously managed to do without him. And they didn't have Paul Flanagan one year through injury and they got around it and they managed to win a county. They didn't have Kelly last year. They got around it, managed to win a county. They just seem to keep on reinventing themselves. And it's a testament to the likes of Kevin Sheehan before and Robbie Hogan was there last year. I'm not sure, I presume, who actually is he still over them again?
Yeah, I think he's still there
this year. Yeah. So the two of them, the way they've kept it going. And the thing that I just saw, we had Porrick McMahon was covering the game for 42, remember, and his match report, he just had a line that it was Mossy Gavin's greatest game for the club, getting 6 points in play. And again, going back to something I said earlier about Ron Hayes, presuming you're the same as me, you look at Ballyea and immediately you want to know how much did Tony Kelly score, and the fact that, okay, he gets 5 points, but Niall Deasy also gets 5 points, Mossy Gavin gets 6, Pierce Hillis gets 3, Morgan Gary gets 3. They're just an unbelievably great battling side, and apparently Flanagan did an unbelievable marking job at the back on Rian Considine and obviously Jack Brown there as well, so I think their staying power is really, really impressive because the Clare Championship was really interesting, for about a 10 period there. I think there was there 7 or 8 winners or something like that. It was a huge kind of a spread, an array, but basically it's been dominated for the last, I think, 6-7 years by Ballyea and 6 Mile Bridge. Now they had never met in a final. I know that there was some talk in Clare last week, this will be the year, but obviously Éire Ennis kind of upset that, and we'll get to that in a minute. But from Ballyea's point of view, with 14 men and everything, a huge win. But Catlow look really disappointed for them because we've lost a semi-final to Ballyea and they lost a final to them a couple of years ago again. And I know that a couple of them have county medals, obviously, from 2009, and they won it in 14 when they got to the Munster final. But for Dermot Ryan, probably would love to get his first. But for the likes of Podge, Conor McGrath, Lee Markham, the older guys, they would absolutely love to have got a third medal and kind of got back to Sean Collins, so obviously a very experienced player, to get back to another final, but wasn't to be.
Yeah, no, a really good performance from Ballyea, and as you say, I think the one thing with Ballyea is it rhymes and everything. Ballyea, they just always find a way, don't they? Regardless who they're missing. To win a county title last year without Tony Kelly, he came on and scored 2 points in semi-final, didn't play any part in the final, as I think he'd gotten surgery in his ankle at that stage. And yeah, it doesn't matter really what and you listed some of the personnel there as well. While we'd always associate Ballyea with Kelly, there are loads of other strings to their bow there, definitely. And it's going to be a fascinating final. They're going to be taking on Éire from Ennis in the final. They had a big win over 6 Mile Bridge in the other semi-final, finished 223 to 217 after extra time. So Éire had ended the Bridges run for 3 in a row last year, and they worked the Oracle again. Shane O'Donnell was brilliant, particularly in the first half. David Reedy really came into his own when he switched to full forward. And Éire now have the prospect. They're another team that are going for the double now. It's amazing. I don't know. Is that a consequence of the split season as well? That just because there's maybe more attention just on the club in general, and maybe you can focus more attention on 2 codes, but the amount of clubs, obviously Rathdode probably finished at the weekend, their double dreams are over. Naas are still going, Éire are still going, Crokes are still going, the Fina, the Bars, and there's probably a couple more, Schlockneil, and there's a couple of more in there as well. It's amazing, and they've got a good few guys, they're balancing a good few guys between the 2 squads as well, Ennis.
Yeah, and there's different clubs. I suppose you're right when you went to seniors, but there's different clubs then who, saying Cork, Blackrock are going for the senior hurling, and they have a good few guys playing for St. Michael's Football Club in the senior A football. So there's guys juggling on both. But in the Éire sense, I remember I was chatting to Paul Madden last year, who was the Éire football manager, and he just felt, Éire got to the hurling semi-final last year. He felt the split season gave them a chance at it because it was just full cooperation. The fixtures were mapped out. He said that was the key. The dates were nailed down. Yeah. He said whatever chance you had before it was just so difficult because the uncertainty, a hurling fixture could get thrown in and suddenly the hurling management needs whatever amount of time, and the football management get another fixture gets thrown in, but at least it was the certainty of every second week now. But we probably have to mention the absolute unbelievable drama at the end of normal time here, where basically Shane O'Donnell gets a goal in injury time to level it at 2:14 apiece, and Éire are celebrating thinking they've got extra time. Next thing, Jamie Shanahan scores a point. It looks like their hearts are broken again, but then they get one more chance. David Reedy points a free and puts it over. They also have, they have Reedy, obviously they have O'Donnell, but they have guys like Kieran Russell. I think
he was injured even coming into the game. I think he did well to play and he contributed massively.
He's an absolute mainstay for the county footballers. Gavin Cooney is. Aaron Fitzgerald is playing for the hurlers this year. He previously played for the footballers. Keane O'Dea then, I think his club nearby, football, they don't, or he's Kilkenny, I think it is. So he plays for Éire Ennis as his nearest hurling club. So they are probably a bit more of a you know, I suppose we were saying earlier, Nafina and Kilmacud have kind of one of each. I think they have a good core. I don't think O'Donnell's actually playing football anymore since his concussion issues. I think he's just playing club hurling. But they have a serious core of guys juggling the boats. And for them, this is a huge thing to get to a final because of the amount of semi-finals they had. I think it was Patrick Kelly, actually, the goalkeeper, scored like a last-minute score to beat them in last year's semi-final against Ina Killamona. Right, they had a couple of heartbreaks before in semis. And you know yourself, it's the classic thing. They are known as the townies. You know, they are the biggest population area in the county, and it is something that can be thrown at urban teams when you're not successful. Like, no one has any sympathy for any urban team. They obviously have their own challenges, but you know, it is interesting as well when you named out the various clubs going for the double. I think Strathmead aside, nearly every one of them is from a city or urban area, or city or big town area now. Upper Church losing at the weekend, they're probably the one exception, the rural side with the 15, almost like for like in both sides, you know. But this is a huge win for Éire Óg. And then it's just the big names stand forward. I mean, O'Donnell seems to be playing unbelievable hurling for them at the moment. When you look at the scores that he's putting up, 1-4 from playing there. He scored a lot in the quarterfinal as well. Really getting 110. Danny Russell, 5 points. So pretty huge thing for them now. First time in 22 years into a final.
Yeah, massive. And like that's been a kind of a common theme over the weekend. We'll go into the Roscommon football in a while as well. Like there's been a lot of potential famines ended, even just getting to finals at this stage. A lot of surprises. Éire Óg, obviously. I think Boyle is the first Roscommon final since 1925, I think, is it? It's mad.
27, 95 years, which is unbelievable for, like, from the outside, as we would look at it. You're thinking, oh, they've, you know, the Smiths, Donny and Enda, Cian McKeown has been playing for Roscommon, Sean Purcell with them for years, you know, but they have been a coming force kind of over the last couple of seasons. And I'm going away from the hurling now as I segue into Roscommon football. But yeah, that was a pretty unbelievable story that 95 years later you're into a final.
We just fly through a couple of comments here quick. James Daly just says, I love the jersey you're wearing, Michael, top class. Kildimo put in a huge performance against Doon, deserve huge credit for what they're doing. Liberties beat the well, not the shock, it seems. A big fan of this retro Limerick jersey. If you want any other retro jersey, go to orgoretro.com, use the promo code OurGame for 15% off the best retro jerseys in the business. Just fly through a couple of other quick hurling results from the weekend. In the Mayo senior final, the local derby between Turin and Ballyhonus. Turin ran out comfortable enough winners, finished 1-14 to Ballyhonus' 2-5. This was played in absolutely horrible conditions. Just saw some footage here of the conditions this is played in. Really, really difficult to get any sort of fluid, free-flowing hurling going, but Turin definitely managed the conditions an awful lot better, and I think Shane Boland, as the captain, led them to victory there. And by all accounts, there's no pub in Turin, so like they'd be basically celebrating on the Monday in Ballyhonus, or they'd be drowning their sorrows on the Monday in Ballyhonus. So all the players will be together. So while they might kill each other on the pitch, I'm sure it's very social and relaxed and a bit of crack when they're all together in the pub on the Monday or the Tuesday after. In the Armagh Senior Hurling Championship semi-final replay, Law of Darragh booked their place in the final with a convincing win over Cuchulainn. It finished 116 to 8 points. Naomh Eoin also booked their place in the Sligo Senior Hurling Championship final. Finished Naomh Eoin 223. Cooler Strand Hill 210, a huge win there. In the Down final, Portaferry are the Down Senior Hurling Championships. Again, very tough conditions, but they came out by 2 points. Portaferry won 12, Ballycran 13. Ronan Blair's penalty goal with 2 minutes of normal time remaining secured Portaferry's 22nd Donegal Senior Hurling Championship crown, and a big win there, despite being reduced to 14 men when Conor McGeehan was red carded 12 minutes into the second half. Portaferry are champions in Down. Trim ended Ratoath's double hopes. James Murray and James Torr inspired Trim to a 113 to 110 win over Ratoath. We'll just fly through a bit of football quickly, Fintan, because I know you have to go in a couple of minutes, but you were looking closely at some of the Kerry senior football action, and I believe on Saturday evening there were some interested Aussie visitors. I thought this was fascinating. Even Zach Toohey being in Portlaoise yesterday, but there were some Geelong cats roaming around Kerry on Saturday evening.
Not just Kerry, they seem to have an unbelievable time. I know you see Kieran Lillis, who's a great buddy of Zach Toohey's and has a bar in Portlaoise. He had a picture up on Saturday of about, I think it's 15 Geelong cat players outside his pub in Portlaoise, and then they were down in Austin Park that night for the Dingle v Dr. Crokes game. Mark O'Connor obviously playing for Dingle. Just to read out, like, it was a tweet my colleague Maurice Brosnan had. He was covering the game. He said about 15 Geelong Premiership winners just landed into the stand in Tralee to watch Mark O'Connor. A man in an Italian 90 hat is roaring "Welcome to Kerry" and shaking their hands, drinking cans of Gordon's Pink Gin and Tonic Premix, but I wouldn't hold it against them. So apparently,
how did they get into the ground? How did they get the old Pink Gin into the ground? I wonder. They were clever enough, I'd say.
I'm not sure. I presume big group of big lads. Are they going to be kind of frisked by a steward or whatever? What way does it go? Like,
true.
You know, deep pockets in these in the big jackets that they were wearing. You know, but it was interesting. O'Connor scored an unbelievably good point, say about 10-15 minutes in, to make it. I think it was 4 points apiece at that stage. But obviously they started shouting out straight away, "What a goal for O'Connor!" So obviously they were familiar with the Aussie rules, given that was the type of score it would be, and someone had to point out to them that was a point. And then, but apparently they raved then about a pass. He put a brilliant pass into Thomas Sullivan in the first half as well. Thomas Sullivan got a mark and kicked the ball over the bar. So obviously, I suppose just on that point for a minute, like, it's kind of really nice, I think, isn't it, that I suppose they've probably been cooped up in Australia for the couple of weeks or for the couple of years with COVID and everything. Great chance for them to continue the celebrations after the grand final and go somewhere different. So they went to obviously support O'Connor and probably around Ireland for a couple of days. And then obviously the impact O'Connor's made. Like, he was out injured a couple of years ago, last year, so he couldn't play for Dingle when he was home in the county championship. In 2018, he did play for them without telling Geelong, if you remember, and he marked Kieran Donaghy at full back. But I mean, I think Padraig Cork, the Dingle manager, had a line today, so on the Examiner, it was like he was asked what position did Mark play, and he goes a little bit of defence, a little bit of attack. But his positioning, he was just all around the place. It was just really, really impressive. And this was a big, big win for Dingle, beating Crokes, who have obviously been the champions for so long, who beat them in the 2018 final. Now, it's important to acknowledge the calibre of players Crokes were missing for injuries. So Fionn Fitzgerald has done his cruciate. Gavin White has still been out for them. Do you remember the injury Gavin White got at the end of the Dublin All-Ireland semi-final? He played the All-Ireland final, but he has obviously missed the club championship. And
that's amazing that he got through the All-Ireland final.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Did he last every minute of the All-Ireland final? I think he did he?
He did, and you remember at the very end, he produced an unbelievable run forward.
Right,
and he either fisted the ball over the bar or he laid it on for someone to point. But, you know, he was still going strong till the very end. And they lost Micheál Burns as well. So that's like two current Kerry seniors and a recently retired Kerry senior. And they're just in a little bit of transition, Crokes from the All-Ireland club winning side. Whereas Dingle, they get Mark O'Connor back. They also brought on, I'm probably going to get the pronunciation wrong, but I think it's Devidas Uosis, who was with the Brisbane Lions.
Good effort.
He came on. And then they had their two Kerry guys in the absolute peak of their powers. So you take that Crokes have lost theirs, but they had Thomas Sullivan and Paul Gainey. And for anyone who watched this game on the live stream, Thomas Sullivan was just an absolute joy to watch. Like, he was playing as kind of a sweeper, but he was kind of pushing up so much. Like, it wasn't just protecting the D. You were talking earlier about the different way hurling Kilmacud and Ballyboden were kind of applying. I think that was the game you're referring to, applying the sweeper, you know, but he was just pushing up so much. Like, he got 5 points, 4 from play. He's just such a beautiful kicker of a ball. He's comfortable soloing off either foot. And then obviously Paul Gainey inside was a brilliant focal point. So huge win for Dingle. And that sets up a pretty big blockbuster semi-final for them next Sunday against East Kerry, who beat Kenmare yesterday in the live game at TG Car, which was probably a bit closer than I would have thought. And maybe a lot of people looking on paper with the kind of wealth of talent that East Kerry have now. They didn't have James O'Donoghue, who he was suspended. They didn't have Cian Gamble able to start because he was injured. But crucially, they had David Clifford, who just produced another exhibition of kicking between marks, frees, and from play in the second half. And that just got them over the line because conditions looked absolutely brutal yesterday for football in Fitzgerald Stadium. But won by 3 points. You know, Kenmare just were very, very competitive, very, 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 very good and very, very solid at the back, but just lacked that bit of scoring punch. You know, got an early goal from a penalty from Paul O'Connor. But Sean O'Shea got a couple of great points, but just probably didn't get enough return up front in the second half and lost out by 3. So, I mean, you've obviously seen the East Kerry team on paper. It's incredible the level of talent they have. From you'd look at it and you think Dingle are their best bet to probably kind of stop them on current form, and we'll go pretty close now next Sunday. And
from
then
an East Kerry point of view, I'd say that to take a scare, because all the talk had been how they were going to waltz through the Kerry Championship, you know, at their leisure or whatever. They've had probably a couple of scares, even having to bring on Clifford a couple of weeks ago when they probably wanted to rest him. But they're definitely not getting it all plain sailing. And that it does go to show as well, though, that like on paper is great, but they're not all the same club, shall we say. They haven't all grown up together and played together and been playing a style of play the whole time. So they're not thrown together because they have trained, you know, a decent bit together. But it's not just on paper, whereas, you know, the Dingle lads obviously have grown up the whole way up together and know each other inside out, on and off the pitch.
Exactly.
So, you know.
And I think the odds of this for East Kerry's game yesterday, I think they were 10-1 or something. It's ridiculous. And they've become such unbackable favourites in the county championship. But they beat Dingle already in the group stages, 213 to 111. But the key now is obviously you have O'Connor back. Presumably he's around for the rest of the county championship. Yosis is another option off the bench. O'Sullivan and Gainey looking absolutely terrific form. A lot of very, very good other solid club players. But I just imagine the lift that must have given the Dingle fellas. Like, I think the story was O'Connor was the first into training last Tuesday night. Like, imagine you're back in West Kerry and then he comes in, like, you know, because obviously the national debate for the last couple of years has been if Kerry had Mark O'Connor, he'd go up against Brian Fintan and that would have helped them stop Dublin's dominance. But from the Kerry point, or from the Dingle point of view, like, they've got to the final in 12, final in 18. They've been in different semi-finals. They have a golden generation of players. You know, they need to try and maximise this and try and get over the line and win a Kerry Senior Championship. But he has just been an incalculable loss for them. So to have him back now, you know, that really sets up next Sunday to be a great game. And we probably should as well mention, I don't know how many times, Verney, you've had to do this, try to explain to people the vagaries of the Kerry Championship system, but pretty interesting stuff on Saturday night. The fact that Austin Sachs, the reigning county champions, beaten after extra time by a Field Rangers team who hadn't won a game since 2017. They'd be kind of the clubs around Listowel area. Wouldn't really have any recognisable names in terms of Kerry senior footballers on the panel, but guys like Barry Manny, Brian Sweeney, Niall Collins have played Kerry underage. That was a huge scalp for them to defeat Austin Stacks. Billy Lee, actually the Limerick manager, is part of their management team. He was involved with them, so that's pretty interesting. They'll play Kerry now in the semi-final, but Austin Stacks lost that game. They now have to play Kenmare Shamrocks Sunday week in the relegation playoff. So, I mean, you could have, Austin Stacks are basically county champions, obviously, last year. And in the Munster Club final, like they started this year in the Munster Club final in January 2022. And now in October 2022, they're battling to avoid relegation to the intermediate ranks for next year. Kieran Donny actually came on for them on Saturday night. So while all the focus is obviously on the county senior, I think that's probably going to be one of the most high-profile relegation playoffs when you've, you know, Donaghy, Sean O'Shea, Stephen O'Brien, loads of big names in action, that one in a fortnight's time.
Well, it doesn't get much more cutthroat than that now. In fairness, It doesn't get any more cutthroat than that.
It's just an unbelievable system. Like, I don't know, there is a debate that they probably should increase it to kind of 12 senior club teams. But I can't think of a situation where a team, I don't know, has that happened before in a calendar year, that a team would have been lost the Munster Club final by 2 points in January and then 9 months later are facing into a relegation playoff in their own county, you know? Just even the fact that...
Yeah, Crokes, did something similar-ish happen to Crokes when they were reigning All-Ireland Club champions? Yeah.
Well, they were in the relegation playoff last year, Crokes, which sums it up again, like, you know, and Crokes won that. They beat Legion. So Legion got relegated, but then that means you have, from an East Kerry point of view, you get Cian Gamble, Jonathan Lyon, James O'Donoghue, Brian Kelly, all either current or former Kerry seniors, you know.
They're really strategic in a way.
It's just unbelievable. Like, to think that Stacks, you know, possibly, or Kenmare, from Kenmare's point of view, obviously you've Stephen O'Brien and Sean O'Shea. So pretty unbelievable stuff. Actually, I just one last thing, the Kerry thing. I don't know if you see it. It was actually a lovely thing Kerry shared that a guy from Summerhill and Meath, and his father came down to the game to watch Sean O'Shea, which is unbelievable. Obviously, you presumably seen all these stories about people going to David Clifford's club junior games to just see him, but basically the father brought, I don't know what age his son was, look, maybe 8 or 9 judging.
He had the Kenmare jersey as well. Where he got it, I don't know.
Yeah, and like great that actually they got to meet O'Shea. I think he signed the jersey and had a few words with him, like, but it's it kind of shows the star power that some of these guys have. It's a different level. Even
I saw Seamus Callan posing for a picture after Drum were beaten yesterday. Yeah. In fairness, like, and our GA stars are unbelievable. They'll hang around through good and bad after games because, you know, some of these kids, the only thing they'll remember, they won't remember what happened on the pitch or remember the result. They just remember whether they got their hurl signed by X, Y, or Z, you know. Clifford's patience, and maybe patience is the wrong word, but the time he makes for people when you see videos and pictures of him and all that is just unbelievable. You know, I think
was it the Kerry Armagh League game this year? I think Oisin McConville was talking about it, that his kids, when the Armagh fixture list came out, all they wanted to know was that they were delighted that Kerry were at home to Kerry, so they were going to get to see David Clifford live. I mean, I don't know. Joe Canning aside, I can't think of someone that has had this kind of a generational profile, and then obviously is producing the performances to match it time after time.
And he's only 23 as well. So hopefully we'll get to see his goodness for the next good to 10 years with Kerry. I know as a Cork man that probably hurts, but that's the nature of the beast.
I think it's a reality we've had to accept a long time ago, yeah.
Fintan, thanks a million for joining us. Really appreciate that. Great insights
No worries,
as always.
Verney. Thanks
a million. Cheers. We're delighted now to bring in a man who is very happy this morning, Damian Lawlor. A win on both fronts yesterday. A win for your adopted Naas and your native Kilruane MacDonagh's in the Tipperary Hurling Championship.
Yeah, mate. Can you hear me there loud and clear?
Oh, loud and clear. Yeah, loud and clear. I'm surprised the voice is still intact, by the way.
Yeah, I think when you have 3 young kids under the age of 11, your voice is safe enough for a few years yet, Mick. It's hands on, but look, I mean, so I'm living here in Naas for the last 10 years or so, Mick, and bottom line anyway. There was a kind of a big famine there over the last year or so. They won the county title last year. They won it in great style. But in the meantime, then back home, we've been having a famine for a long, long time as well with the hurling team back home at senior level. So, you know, when I grew up making Kilruane, I was very, very lucky, very, very privileged. I was looking at my team. You know, they were all heroes of mine. School teacher Gilbert Williams. All over the road, all over the village of Kilruane, over to our crony Cloughjordan. We had teams who were winning county titles, challenging for Munster titles, and we won an All-Ireland club title. And I remember getting up on the train to Croke Park, St. Patrick's Day, 86. That's how old I am. But I was only a kid, and I was allowed to travel with the team. After every game, Mick, I used to go into the dressing room, sit down beside Eamon O'Shea. Eamon O'Shea was my hero. I'd say he hadn't the fucking rashers who I was at the time, because Eamon was up in Dublin, or he was lecturing in Galway. But that's what I grew up with, like winning All Irelands, you know, doing very well in the county, winning North Tipperary titles. And the hallmark of our team in Kilruane was that whenever we went behind, that's when you switched on. They were a tough team. They were full of unbelievable hurlers. But when they went behind, you knew then that they kind of, I suppose, were going to find another gear. And then in 2000, we played Upper Church again in a relegation semi-final. And I was doing the hurleys at that time for the team. And we got beaten by the next game by St. Mary's to put us down intermediate. And that's how quickly it can change. Like, you know, I mean, it was a big, big blow for us. But I think all the work started at underage again then fairly soon. And you produced many fine underage teams in that period, Mick. And I suppose to bring it up to current day, for the last 10 years, I've been going back all around Ireland working no more than yourself. Everywhere I go, people say, you're from Kilruane. Geez, you've got a great team coming through. And we had a great team coming through. Like, you know, the likes of Seamus Hennessy, Jack Peters, Owen Hogan, they would have all won minors with Tip back around the mid-noughties under Liam Sheedy. You know, you had Ray Malotany, you had Darrell Peters. You know, I'm probably leaving out a load of people here now, but like even before the likes of Bill O'Mara and Jerry Cal came along, you had a really good cohort of players. But then, as the kind of the new decade started, the general consensus around North Tipperary would be we've missed our chance, to be honest about it. But we're back in county final now for the first time in 36 years. And as I talk to you here today, the great thing I can say is that nobody's getting carried away with it. I mean, I thought myself I'd get carried away. I was nearly getting carried away before the game, to be honest with you. I got very, very wrapped up in the whole thing. But I think the lads are very, very focused. Chatting to a few of them this morning, they're getting ready to go again because there's a monumental task ahead now. But that's kind of the backdrop to where we're at. I feel a lot of people felt that our best chances have gone, but yet here we are.
Great place to be. Everyone wants to be in a county final, and I think you're close to emulating your near neighbours in Shinrone, who won their first Offaly title last week. So the celebrations around between those two places.
And the gas thing is, yeah, and if the pubs met there in the middle, there could be a busy time. But the gas thing about Shinrone is they're playing Naas in the Leinster Senior Hurling Championship, and I think a lot of Naas people are wondering what sort of a test they'll get from Shinrone. And had that game been on this weekend, Naas might have had a great chance with all the celebrating that Shinrone were doing, but that game is not for another couple of weeks, so that'll be a wide open test as well. But yeah, look, what does it do for a club? Like, I would have seen it at first hand maybe our under 17s and 19s of the last couple of years, and we're not producing maybe the amount of great young players that we were at a rate of knots that we were. But our under 13s won a County A and a County D final last week, and our under 15s got beaten in the North Tipperary final by Tumivara. So we are coming again underage, Mick. And that's a great thing about having a traditional club. Once the work goes in, it's all very well having a traditional club. If the work doesn't go in at underage, forget about it. But there might be a gap now from the end of this team to the kind of the arrival of the next generation. But it's important then. That's why it's so important to be in a final, to be visible all the time.
100%, and that'll obviously inspire the next generation. I'll just fly through the results quickly. The two Tipperary semi-finals. So it finished Kilruan McDonough's 217, Upper Church Drumban 114. So the double dreams are over for Upper Church. They obviously they do have a silver lining in it. They have a football final to look forward to.
Yeah.
And the other semi-final was Killadangan 121, Drummond 117. Just to go through the Kilruan game quickly, Jerome Cahill was brilliant again. He hit 1-4 from play for Liam O'Kelly's side. They led by 2-9 to 1-7 at half time, thanks to goals from Cahill and from Keane Darcy as well. TJ Butler netted at the other end, but it was a bridge too far for the double chasing Upper Church Drumban men. Comprehensive enough, Damian. Probably, they're probably coming to the boil at the right time. Like, so even the Toom game was very tight before this. They're probably coming to their peak just when you want them to be, hopefully.
Yeah, Mick, the Toom game was poor now, I'll be honest with you. Like, I mean, Liam Cahill, Paddy Maher, a few more of the tip backroom team were behind us in the stand yesterday. And I don't know what they would have got from the Tumivara game, but they might have, look, they saw Jerry Cahill yesterday, was absolutely exceptional. I think we were the better team from start to finish. I don't think Upper Church probably did themselves justice yesterday, to be honest about it. They're a fine team. They're very, very workmanlike. Gavin Ryan, very, very good centre back. Dean Carew came on to try and do a man marking job on Cahill, but Jerry Cahill physically exerted himself to another level yesterday. I think I saw he got physically sick behind the goal line towards the end of that game, but came out near the end of the field, dominated. So I think Kilruan really was, as the game went on, it was evident that Jerry Cahill had nearly the winning of the game at full forward, Mick. And the trick would have been to get into him as quickly as possible. There was a few overlaps there that we missed. Possibly could have got another few scores. But overall, a fairly dominant display. Jack Peters went off with a hamstring after a few minutes. That upset matters. But Seamus Hennessy came into the half-back line. You know yourself what he brings, long-range scores and a bit of... Sure, Fez brings everything, really. He's one of the players... He shouldn't even be hurling, I'd say, with the amount of injuries that he's had. One player that really impressed me yesterday, Mick, was Mark O'Neill, developing into a fine club hurler at number 9 alongside Sean McAdams. So the two of them now will have a really big role to play against Killadangan in the final, trying to match that work rate. And up front then, I think the two Keanes, Keane O'Kelly and Keane Darcy, they both struck at various times, but I think we're probably going to need them to strike for longer and for much more probably frequent patches if we are to have a hope in the county final. We need the two of those because of unbelievable talent. As regards Upper Church, I think it took us a while to put them out of sight. I would say myself that they probably lacked a little bit of cohesion, a little bit of calmness, and a little bit of poise. We did an awful lot of hurling, but I think we couldn't get clear until maybe the last 5 or 6 minutes. But for once, Mick, watching Kilruan, the last 5 or 6 minutes were actually, I won't say enjoyable because they never could be, but you could actually bear them. I turned around to John Casey, John the physio, and Paddy White, a friend of ours, and I said, Jesus, are we actually there? Like, the lad said, yeah, I think you can say we are now, but your kind of little inner voice was saying, oh, jeez, because we've had so many upsets over the last 10 years, Nick, and so many hard disappointments, and the parish has had tough times as well. We've lost a lot of great people in the last few years, and they're to the fore of everybody's mind as well,
The GA, there's nothing better than the GA to bind the community, particularly through hard times. Porter, who I'm fairly sure is out from the puck on direction, says Kilruan are my favourites.
Yeah, I'd say Porter could be from Carrick or Ballycommon or Drummondere or puck on, but there's no denying where Porter. So look, leaving aside my bias and all the rest of it, I do anything to see Kilruan win, but Killang will be overwhelming favourites going into this. There's no point in saying otherwise, but that doesn't mean anything really. Come down to the day, Kilruan put a shift in, anything can happen, and that's what the lads will be looking for.
Yeah, 100%. Just fly through a bit of detail on that other semi-final. So, as I said there earlier, it finished 121 to 117. Dan O'Mara got the goal at the end, which really put the game to bed. It's funny, in the two semi-finals, probably the two losing goalkeepers won't like looking back at being blocked out. Both were blocked down with the ball ending up in the net, which is not something you see too often. It's I suppose safety first is probably the most important thing, really. Seamus Callan had gotten a goal for Drum in the early second half, but Kildangan, who had probably maybe flattered to deceive up until this point, this is probably one of their better performances of the year, coming in against a Drum team who had loads of momentum and were after dethroning Lockmore in the quarter final. So this is set up for a really interesting final, and there's not exactly a million miles between the two either.
No, we're very, very close, and I think we've been well aware. Look, Kildangan are a great club, Nick. To be honest with you, you'd be envious of what they've achieved over the last few years, but they're a proper club as well. Like you wouldn't see one Kildangan lad around Nina around North Tip. You see 20 of them. They all go to support the minors, and they all go to support every club team is there. Like the senior Bs have probably had a tough weekend, but they're an awesome kind of club in terms of their facilities as well. And people like Eamon Kelly and Brian Lawlor and Dara Egan have drove it on at a rate of nuts. But yesterday, they were probably the better team from start to finish. I don't think Drum got going at all. Drum are probably a young team, I'd say. Over the next 2 years, Mick, I would see them getting over the line. You mentioned Owen Collins there, the Drummond goalkeeper. He actually had a fine game, made 2 great saves, puck outs or pinpoint accuracy. I think Liam Cahill will take a look at him. Got caught in the last minute, but that was maybe, suppose by the time the ball was in his top of him, he didn't have much time to react either. But anyway, he got snared, and Dan did a John Troy and sent it to the back of the net. Dan's an unbelievable player. Surprisingly, he's not starting because he's just physically and the height of him. He's a great footballer as well, by the way. He was trying very hard to get. Dan was trying very hard to make. He was on the tip football team for a while as well. But I think he's some option to have on the bench. And that goal really sealed it because until about 10 seconds beforehand, it looked like Drummond Inch might get the equaliser. And had they got the equaliser and had that game gone in to extra time or had it been a replay or whatever, I'd really fancy Drum because Kildangan did all the hurling and yet they couldn't put Drum away. But Drum's, I think at the left side of the Kildangan defence, they struggled a little bit in the first half. Drum got a few scores from that direction, Mick, but they completely tightened up in the second half. And I know Callanan hit 1-1. But their work ethic of Kildangan, that's the one thing I point out for. Flynn is probably playmaking everything. He's going to be one to really watch in the final. Joe Gallagher pulls out the strings up front. I'm really impressed with Brian Malotany the whole time, Mick. I think he'll have to feature in some sort of a look-in at some stage too. He's size and the physicality of inter-county hurling, but he has all the goods. He's from a famous hurling family as well. And then Billy Seymour, another game under Billy's belt, he got taken off yesterday. Willie Connors has come back into his own as well. So to summarise, they definitely deserved yesterday. Drum and Inch were the form team coming into yesterday. I'd say Kildangan were stung by the fact that people have been pointing out that they weren't their usual selves, but they produced it yesterday. And I think they'll go into the final in a good place. But look, it's a local derby. It's really one to look forward to. You've got 2 weeks to look forward to that. And as for Drum and Inch, they'll be disappointed, but they'll rise again, Mick. There's no doubt about that. They have a fine young team. The Campions will be looked at, Collins will be looked at, and Thomas Nolan and David Collins, they're fine players up front as well. But they just didn't get that fluidity yesterday. They missed a few wides from frees as well, and that cost them.
Just fly through a couple of quick comments here. Richard Hogan just says Kildangan are maybe hitting a bit of form, so there should be a great clash in that final. I'd say both teams are hitting form, so definitely, yeah. SSRI is making a play for Nina. The final should nearly be played in Nina with 2 neighbouring parishes. I always loved her in Nina, I have to say. Porter says Kilruan are the noisy neighbour. I just fly through a couple of other results. There was obviously a relegation final where Temple-Derry Kenyans came out on top by 8 points against Aero Gannacarty Donahill. It finished 221 to 19 points, and a couple of other results that I neglected to mention earlier. So Richie Hogan's Danesfort, they will play Thomastown in the Kilkenny intermediate final after both teams had wins at the weekend, and the junior final will be contested between Wine Gap and the Black and Whites. Two great GA club names there. Damian, I know we're talking about your ties with Naas. Naas had a really good win yesterday. Probably wasn't the prettiest game, but having waited, I think, 31 years to get their hands on the Dermot Burke Cup, now they have, you know, back-to-back titles. They finished Naas 112, Clare 6 points. I think Alex Byrne won man of the match, and Paddy McDermott had a great game as well. Isn't it amazing how, you know, you wait so long to get over the line, and then you have the know-how, you have it's like a release valve almost. You know how to get over the line, and now they're nearly old hands at it.
And that's the key point, Mick, because they went in yesterday and they had that edge over Clane, a young Clane side that probably Tom Cribben probably brought through from minor, many of them. And Naas held the ball, they moved it quickly, they kept out of the tackle, and they picked off their few scores. And Joey Murphy's their manager now, and Kevin Downs is their coach. Both of those are highly, highly rated managers and coaches. Joey did a great job with Aero and Carlo, and Downs, from my mind, Downs is one of the best coaches on the circuit. I know a lot of people have tried to get him to step up a level, but I think he's happy enough with Naas at the moment. What a coup he was. Basically, you mentioned Paddy McDermott there. Paddy broke free at the end and got that goal. They never really stretched Clane to the max, Mick, until the final few phases, but they didn't need to. So Clane had the wind in the opening stages. I actually got in to see a bit of that game near the end. Clane had the opening kind of boost of having the wind behind their back, but they opted to put a lot of men behind the ball, and they opted even nearly to concede a few kickouts. And Naas dominated the kickout battle. I think they won possibly 14 out of 20. And I think that gave Naas a huge platform. Nearly 2.5 minutes gone before a Clane man got on the ball. So from a holistic point of view, Tom Cribben brought a lot of those lads on from underage, and they'll benefit from this final. But it was definitely a step too far for them yesterday. Naas's experience, Naas's kind of know-how, the likes of Eamon Callaghan, the likes of Owen Doyle, the likes of Paddy McDermott, the likes of Paul McDermott. These guys have been around the block a bit. You've got Brian Byrne then and James Burke, who I really admire, me because they're playing both codes. Like I was in the gym there in Killashee a few weeks ago. I was bench pressing 5 kg, Mick.
I thought you were going to blow yourself up here, but in fairness, you've downplayed it.
No, I had lads squat me as well. Is that what they call it? Spot me, is it?
Yeah.
With the 5 kg each side. But as I was putting back the weight, James Burke came in. Like, it was only like 8 hours previously that he had won a county hurling final, and there he was back in pumping weights again. And you know, you can rabbit on all about it, but that's the commitment that's required. Like, you know, and both himself and Brian Byrne are very, very clever players. And I was looking at it there yesterday. As bad as the conditions were, there was a massive crowd at it, a bloody huge crowd from Clane. But Naas had about 9 scorers, Mick. And that's quite impressive in a football game in conditions like that at this time of year. And I think they'll, you know, obviously the likes of Kilmacud Crokes, if they do get beyond Dublin or whatever, they'll be hot favourites to win in Dublin and go beyond that. But like Naas are learning the whole time too. They have a good kind of a setup there. It's a very, very successful club. They won the camogie, they won the hurling, and they won the football. Their minors got beaten in the football final by Raheens yesterday, so that was a setback. But overall, can't say anything yesterday. They win so long. They're enjoying it today. I was down the town and saw them having their coffee, but they were walking from the coffee house maybe down to another house. I would have thought, and it could be a good few days for them here. But they do deserve it. And people say about the population race and all that. It's obviously great to have that, but Mick, I see it at first hand myself. I'm involved maybe in the camogie underage here. I'm involved in, my young lads are playing a lot, and just the work that goes in is phenomenal. It's absolutely in both hurling and football. Like, they might have a population, but they're in the trenches putting the work in as well. They're going to be a great club going forward, I think, from here.
I think Joe Fortune made a great comment on RTE the other night. He said, you talk about these super clubs, but you need super people involved with them, especially when you have that sort of volume of people. I'm from a town, obviously, when I live just outside Bor. We're a town club as well. Yes, you have the numbers, but they have to be cultivated, and you need the amount of bodies. I think within an urban area, you need the rural mentality of, you know, maintaining everyone's involvement, getting huge numbers and maintain it the whole way through, because it's not just as simple as having numbers, as you well know.
Well, you know, Jesus, it's not like this super club thing is easy to throw around. I mean, the likes of Crokes and the likes of these, like Naas would have a huge membership. Like, there's no point in saying otherwise. And you know, even where I come from, like, is a rural club, and it wouldn't have half the resources or whatever. But like the same mentality is there. Like, I mean, once you go underage, and once you get a group of mentors that are obsessed by it. And I'm lucky, my young lad is 11. He's playing under 11 and playing under 12 in both codes, and his mentors are like the opportunities that they have, like from go games to coming to Munster, to the leagues. And in Kildare, then Mick, the guys hurling team, they were playing Dublin on a Saturday, and maybe from next year onwards they'll play down in Kilkenny and get a chance there. So they're serious about hurling. They go to tournaments all around Ireland and they hold their own. That doesn't happen overnight. Numbers are great, but you have to have that obsessive drive to get in the trenches and develop talent. And I think they're doing that. If I could say probably one thing about yesterday, um, they were able to deal with a team that probably was content to sit back, and that's not always easy to break down as well. Naas are traditionally a free-flowing running team. They like to go end to end. So yesterday would have been a bit of a cultural upheaval for them, but they still got through it, and that's a sign of a good team. However, like Drum and Inch, Clane are a good young team coming through, and they learn a lot from that.
Definitely, no, without a doubt, they definitely are a common team. Probably were, from what I'm hearing, a tad maybe over defensive in the final, but you can't go away maybe from what brought you to the dance. But they probably needed to be a bit more open, and conceding kickouts to a team like Naas is probably, like as Cyril Farrell would say, it's nuts to a monkey.
Yeah, and with the wind as well. I don't want to be too critical of them because it was only until the last really couple of minutes that they were completely stretched. So from that point of view, they probably did achieve some bit of satisfaction, but they were probably chasing that game from the moment the ball was thrown in, Mick, to be honest with you. And maybe it's because they're a young side and maybe they feared what Naas could bring. And maybe Naas did not launch that high octane running game that they are capable of, but they did enough to get through. And maybe if you're a Clare player today, you might be sitting down saying, should we have had more of a cut? But again, Mick, you probably don't want to veer too much from what got you to the final. They were playing good, systematic control football all the way up to the final now, and this will be a setback for them.
Yeah, getting to a final and having that experience will be huge. Joe Butler says, Black and Whites, I'd like to hear you pronouncing that name. Have a go. I think it's Skohovostin or something along those lines. It's like that Skahina Rinky down in Tipperary. Yeah, not exactly simple. You can see why they maybe go with a name that's maybe a little bit easier to pronounce. But just fly through a couple of it. Yeah, fly through a few other quick football results. In Galway, it was obviously at the quarter-final stage. John O'Mahony has worked the Oracle again with Salt Hill knocking a Cara. They booked their place in semi-finals, had a narrow win over Toon Stars, a Toon Stars side who had been flying coming into that game. There's a couple of the margins in Galway this weekend were so tight. So Salt Hill got through by a point. Mount Bellew My Law also got through by a point against Corrafin. That's two big championship games in a row. When they've been able to beat Corrafin. Barry McHugh gave a masterclass, scoring 10 points. Anna Down, who needed to win their final group game by 11 points to qualify for the knockout stages, are now in the semi-finals, led by Damian Comer. They had a 2-point win over St. Michael's. And Mike Cullen had another narrow win over Clare Galway, 112 to 111. And just in the relegation playoffs, Cardiff Strand are safe. They had a 2-6 to 8 points win over Monivea Abbey. And Unspedale are also safe. They had a 4-point win over St. James's. It would be very remiss of me not to offer our sympathies to everybody in Creeslough as well over the tragedy up there over the weekend. Obviously, the Donegal football final was cancelled as a result. Sure, that'll be refixed for this weekend or the weekend after. But sympathies to everybody involved there. We love the GA, but the GA is only a small kind of microcosm in the grander scheme of life, and sympathies to everybody there. Just look at the Derry semi-finals briefly. Glen, they were 5-3 up at one stage early on. I think it might have been a half time, and they obliterated Newbridge thereafter. They booked their final place in Derry, 212 to 4 points, and a real tasty final there. They're going to play Schlockneil. Schlockneil had a 212 to 2-4 win over Lavey in the other semi-final. And Damian, I know you've been a busy man. How many books? What number book is this? This is After the Storm by Damian Lawlor, the GA, COVID, and the Power of People. I don't know where you get the time, but how many books have you under your belt now?
There's a few, making fairness, and I tell you, like I don't know, I have an awful bloody thing inside me. Like I'd love to be able to. Hopefully, this will be the last for a while, anyway.
The last for this year, anyway.
Yes. Oh, I don't know. I'd like to you pour everything into them. Like, I mean, there's some. Don't get me wrong. I've started off by doing the Lean Done book back in 2004, and that was just a pleasure, Mick. Like, all I had to do was sit down there, which was very hard for me. Sit down and shut up, and just hold the dictaphone to Liam, and off he went. He was fabulous. And then the next one, then the Water for Footballers book. I followed them around for a year, and probably that's the book I enjoyed most. Like, you know, they were they were really down Division 4, but I got a great kick out of that. The sales would have been modest, but it got a runner-up in Sports Book of the Year, and to me that would meant a huge amount because I think Dolan Logue's book won the same year, but even to get mentioned up at that level was superb. And then you meet great characters along the way, like Larry Corbett and Sean Cavan, and they come to you and ask you, and it's very hard to say no, like, and but I like to do my own ones as well. And this one then, Mick, I was probably up to maybe 2 years ago. As you know, I was probably doing a sole trader effectively. I was working for Sky, I was working for Air Sport, I was doing a lot for GA TV, and I was writing a bit for maybe the Times Ireland, and the Sun, and a few places like that. And I wasn't really doing any news reporting at all. And I've been news correspondent like for maybe 15 years, and I'd have done all that. But then I got into RT about 2.5 years ago. I was put back on the news beat among other things, and I suppose every day, Mick, you're dealing with the COVID return to play and all the stuff that COVID brought. And I suppose when you're starting a new job, you want to impress and you want to show people that you know your stuff. So I got really stuck into that whole thing. But after about a few months, Mick, I could see the unbelievable efforts that GA people were making to get through this and help each other. And that's why it's probably not really a GA book at all. It's just a book about people helping each other. And I said it to Paul Rouse, the county man of yours. I said, I'm thinking about doing a book on this because maybe a year later when things have calmed down a bit. And Paul goes, no, you're mad. People are sick of COVID. And I said it to my publisher as well. And he'd been pushing me to do a follow-up to the last one when the world stops watching. And I said to him, this is my idea. And he goes, no, people are COVID weary. So I said, okay. Then I went back a few weeks later and I kind of said, this is the pitch I have, lads. This is the angle I have. And they were kind of saying, all right, that's totally different than what we thought you were talking about. So I kind of focused on people's resilience to get through the shite that COVID presented on their doorstep, basically. And all my stories start off with one of the spearheads of Antrim GA on a ventilator fighting for his life in a 16-day coma, basically. You move there to probably another hurler, inter-county hurler, who was kind of struggling with addiction. And then COVID started. And I suppose the worst thing for anybody in addiction, Mick, is to be on their own. And then suddenly you're isolated and you're locked down the whole lot. And then I spoke to a nurse, camogie player, she worked in Waterford Regional Hospital. She got diagnosed with cancer. Her whole thing to get her through was to play for Moonkind camogie team again and win a county championship. She did that 5 months after being diagnosed with cancer and after going through. Yeah. So she was basically going around with a pick line in during chemo, doing 5K runs or trying to do it at her pace, just to keep ticking over. And throughout COVID, throughout lockdown, her friends knocked on the door and gave her some goodies because they couldn't come into her, but they were there with her the whole way through. So you might say, Jesus, Damian, that's all very depressing, but it's all about the fightbacks and all about the comebacks. So it's not depressing at all. It's all about people, Mick. So effectively, I took from what I was dealing with on a day-to-day basis, looked in a bit deeper to the whole thing, and I went and got all those stories, blended them together with the kind of return to play stuff that was happening the whole time. Like, how many can we have in the stadium today? You know, are you allowed to sterilize your hands indoors? Are you allowed to go indoors? All that sort of stuff. So try to tie it together and look at, hopefully it's out about a week now and hopefully it'll go down well, hopefully. You never know.
Well, it's a crazy kind of couple of years that we've been through. Hopefully we'll never experience anything like it again, but it's a great kind of book to have to show people what it was actually like during those times, because it was crazy going to matches. Even it was crazy. It was just crazy. Everyday life was mad, really. Is there any one story? I know I just fly through a couple of them here quickly, and I know you've mentioned a few of them already, Damian, but I'll just ask you then at the end, is there any one in particular that kind of stands out? So you're talking about stories include a barrister and a GA executive coming out of a 16-day coma and off a ventilator. As you said there, a young nurse diagnosed with cancer, but during lockdown and chemo, thoughts of winning Camogie Championship kept her going. How David Brady single-handedly rang the vulnerable and elderly and isolated in the depths of the virus. An inter-county hurler and recovery addict finds himself isolated at the start of COVID just after coming out of rehab. His teammates gather around him. The pandemic presidency, how John Horn led the association out of the abyss. There are so many interesting stories. It's difficult to single out any one, but is there any one in particular? Which one struck you most, shall I say?
Okay, so from we're probably out of time now, so I won't go on long. From a biased point of view, the whole Tipperary football thing, having all their best players, having 6 of their best players back in Ireland at the time that they were all supposed to be off travelling, and allowed us to win a Munster title down in Cork. And I was at that, and having been part of maybe tip underage setups in the past, geez, that meant an awful lot. And to get that story in, and obviously Lockmore Castellini had a 2-year journey whereby I say the lads in Lockmore were kind of half oblivious to COVID because we were so busy playing hurling and football the whole time. The one thing that stands out to me, Mick, is actually the Irish in New York. We have no idea, and hopefully when you read the chapter, Mick, you'll see, like, they literally kept families from going under. They were part of a movement called Sláinte 2020, whereby the amount of undocumented Irish still out there at the moment with no access to health insurance, even though they're paying tax out there and stuff like that. So what New York GEA did, like, for example, the football coaches would be going around making dinners, dropping it off to the nurses in New York hospitals. And it would be the only hot meal that the nurses or the medics would have. They never wanted anything for it, just left it at the door and went away again. But they raised money to pay people's rent. There was a huge rise in kind of domestic violence. They helped offset all that. The mental stress of the Irish having, so okay, Mick, you're an Irishman of a certain age or an Irish girl. What are we known for in America? Like, we're known for our hospitality, and where do most of us work when we go over there? The service industry, and pubs and restaurants, and all that was shut down. So all those jobs were gone. All the incomes were gone. So I was actually bowled over by the work that New York GA put into looking after the Irish out there, and equally in London there was a huge, and I felt it important not to forget those either. And then another thing that struck me, I got maybe 2 hours with the Taoiseach in an interview for the book because his son was the Cork goalkeeper, still is, and just to have his perspective on it, he was getting flack everywhere from. So John Horan rung him to say, remember the county final celebration spilled over in Blackrock?
Yeah.
So John Horan rung Micheál Martin. John was having none of this. He goes, we're shutting down the whole thing. And there was silence on the other end of the line. And John goes, Taoiseach. And the Taoiseach's son was playing in the county final 6 days later. And Micheál didn't want the game to be called off at all. And he goes to him, are you sure, John? And John goes, no, we're wiping this. We're cutting out everything. Just to get Micheál Martin's perspective on it. Not only was he getting flack from the whole country, he was getting flack in his own house from the two sons. Wanted to know why their games were called off. That localizes everything for me. So Ireland's a great country like that. But look, Mick, I really enjoyed it. And I kept the old administration governance thing to a minimum. And it's really just people's stories the whole way through. And GEA is just a kind of a byproduct of what it is. But you kept saying it a few times, Mick, even dealing with the tragedy in Donegal. It's GEA people coming in around you. You never see the likes of it. And that's why even with Killer One winning yesterday, like, it boils down who you grew up with and who brought you on. And that's why the whole thing is so important. Look, hopefully it goes well. It's out for Christmas now anyway, so please God it will go okay.
Well, I'd give it another little plug here, Damian. It's a great read. The bits I've read of it so far are absolutely fascinating, and it's just amazing. You don't know, because you were denied, access to people during that time. You didn't meet friends and family and whatever. You didn't know what was going on in a lot of people's lives, and this is a fascinating insight. So it's After the Storm, the GA COVID and the Power of People by Damian Lawlor, available in all good bookshops, and the ideal stocking filler, it would be fair to say. The ideal stocking filler. Damian, thanks a million.
From a Lawlor family point of view, that's right, Mick. Yeah, absolutely.
Damian, thanks a million for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mick. Best of luck. Bye, pal.
Talk to you soon. Best of luck to the McDonald's. Mind yourself. Just fly through a couple more quick results. I actually have a dog barking in the background here, so apologies if there's any noise in the background. But we still have a couple of county finals and games that we haven't got through. Such a busy weekend again. We've gone through Galway, Kildare, Armagh. The Armagh Senior Football Championship final will be between Crossmaglen Rangers, who had a big win over Mara Sean McDermott, a 3-15 to 1-6. They will play Grainmore, who had a 2-9 to 8 points win over Killeavy. So it was a first half blitz from Crossmaglen as they scored 1-7 without reply in the first quarter. That really set them on their way to victory. Longford final, full of drama. I was just listening to this on the radio. I was down at the Wicklow final yesterday. So Colm Kill captured a Connolly Cup for the first time in 14 years. Thanks to centre half back Rory Harkin. He scored a last gasp penalty. I think it was won by his brother in a dramatic finish to the county final, played in awful conditions up in Pearse Park. So Gowna are in the Cavan final next weekend. And the other two clubs that surround Lochgown, Columkill and Mullinyock, played the Longford final, and Columkill came out on top there. A huge win for them, and a bit of a barren period ender for them too. It'll show you how difficult conditions were in Longford as well. The Intermediate Football Championship final, Ballymahan 3-4, Father Manning Gales 1-9. Not too often that a county final is won with a tally of 3-4, but that was the case in the Longford Intermediate Football Championship final. In Laois, Portarlington are champions for the third time in a row. So no team had recorded hat-trick wins in Laois outside of Portlaois since the Heat in 1962. So Portarlington achieved that against a side that are only a few miles apart. I was reading the other day that I think all 30 starters went to secondary school together in Kalash to Isagon in Portarlington, which is just a mad statistic, really. But Portarlington were much the better side here. That game was on TV yesterday. They ended up 213 to 8 points winners. And after putting up a really good show against Kilmacud Crokes last year, I'm sure they'll fancy their chances of potentially going on a bit of a run in Leinster again. In Louth, it finished RD St. Mary's 112, Newtown Blues 112. So this will go to a replay. And kind of, to be fair, I think a final shouldn't go to extra time or penalties. That's just my own view, because I think it's too much of a lottery, penalties in particular. So these sides will have to meet again. Dara McConnell levelled the Louth senior final for RD against traditional kingpins Newtown Blues. The dreadful conditions on the day suited few, but the RD marksman stood up when needed most. The slalom, his breathtaking effort over the bar to level an absolute trawling encounter, and in the conditions that were yesterday, 112 is pretty good shooting from both sides. The Westmeath County final, bit of an upset, it would have to be said. I know they came in probably playing the better of the two sides on the balance of play, but the Downs defeated St. Lomans 1-8 to 7 points. So this is their first Westmeath senior football crown in 17 years. Lara Wall's Chargers deservedly dethroned St. Lomans in horrible conditions again in Mullingar. A great win for the Downs. No doubt they'll be celebrating today and tomorrow and for a few days to come. A huge win there against a Lomans side who obviously had the likes of Ronan O'Toole, John Heslin, Paul Sherry and a few more. So that it is an upset. Traditionally over the last couple of years, it's definitely an upset because Lomans have been the kingpins in Westmeath for quite a while. The Antrim Senior Football Final, this actually did go to extra time, so it finished Clan Naharan Cargan 118, seeing Mary's Ahagalan 3-9. So Cargan had a 3-point victory in extra time. The McCann brothers, Mick and Tomas, combined to lead Erin's own Cargan to their 4th Antrim Senior Football Championship crown in 5 years and their 11th in all. This was an absolutely enthralling game by all accounts and a huge win for Cargan there after extra time. Ronan Devlin, who's described as their reluctant manager, the Ballinderry native, was happy in his role as assistant manager under Damian Cassidy. They won 3 in a row together before being dislodged by Craig and Kickham's last year. Cassidy headed back to his native Balahi, and Devlin took some persuading to take the Cargan hot seat. But whoever did the persuading, they were definitely proven right anyway, because a big win for Cargan there after extra time. And the quarterfinals in Tyrone, Clonaux, O'Rahilly's 1-9, Dunamore 10 points, Nave Columkill 10 points, Loch McCrory 9, Dromore 6 points, Oma 5. Definitely not a classic encounter played out there, but Dromore get the job done. And Errigal Kieran 116, Dungannon 111. The Canavans are absolutely on fire here. Rory fired 1-3 and Dara scored 5 points. And I think Rory's goal was basically a lot of very, very hard work done by Dara to set him up. Probably something that they worked on in the garden over the past 15 or 20 years growing up. And in Roscommon, after 7 consecutive seasons where the Roscommon Senior Football Final was contested by any 2 out of the 4 powerhouse clubs in the south of the county, that's Pierce's, Clonagale, Roscommon Gales and Bridget's, a novel pairing. Final pairing will be lined up this year in a fortnight's time after Strokestown and Boyle had hard-fought wins yesterday. Finished Strokestown 2-8, Roscommon Gales 11 points. There was a lobbed goal where the keeper was lobbed off his line was really the difference here. As Strokestown progressed to their first final in 20 years. So Frankie Dolan's Roscommon Gales side had taken out the county and provincial champions Pádraig Pearses in the quarter-final, but they found themselves trailing 6 points to 1-5 at the interval after Colm Neary netted in the 22nd minute. The Gales resumed with scores from Peter Galuli, Mark Purcell and Richard Hughes to take the lead, but a defensive mix-up led to Paddy Brogan raising Strokestown's second green flag, and that was ultimately the difference, with points from Diarmuid McGann, Keith Murphy, and Cathal Lavin seeing them over the line. And a real fairy tale story on the other side as well. Finished Boyle 112, St. Bridget's 12 points. So it was really a momentous weekend for football in North Roscommon. Boyle reached their first county final, as I was saying to Fintan earlier, since 1927. 95 years they had to wait. They beat the former All-Ireland Kingpins, St. Bridget's, along the way. Donny Smith kicked Donny Smith's 20-minute injury or 28-minute penalty brought the winners back into contention. Even though Bridget led 9 points to 1-3 at half-time, Boyle rallied in the third quarter with Robbie Dolan, Ben O'Carroll and Shane Conan helping them hit in the front, and that's where they stayed until the final whistle. The semi-finals in Fermanagh were also played this weekend. Enniskillen Gaels dethroned Derry Gonley Harps. It was a last-minute penalty, which you'll see on the OurGame Twitter and across the OurGame social media channels. Really dramatic conclusion to that game there. And Enniskillen Gaels will play Erin Gaels Balik in the final. They had a 1-7 to 1-6 win over Kinawley. In Wexford, Castletown had a good win over St. James's, 1-9 to 8 points. And they will play Shelmaliers in the county final. Shelmaliers had a big win over St. Anne's Rothangan, 5-11 to 6 points. The new Wexford senior football manager, John Hegarty, is obviously over Shelmaliers as well. So they'll face Castletown in the final, where Wexford stalwart Ben Brosnan will come up against Brian Malone, who was another Wexford stalwart until hanging up the boots earlier on this year. In Waterford, the preliminary quarterfinals, Clashmore Kinsale Beg beat Kilmacthomas, Portlaw beat St. Saviour's, Bricky Rangers caused a big upset beating Stradbally. This was the real shock of the round, 1-9 to 1-8. So Brick Walsh was undone by the Brickies here, with Waterford attacker Tom O'Connell scoring 1-5. Shane Ahern missed the last gasp free as he slipped when taking the free, which would have potentially levelled it for Stradbally. Kilrosanti had 15 points to 8 points win over Onreen. So the semi-finals, set 4 in the semi-finals are Kilrosanti, Bricky Rangers, Portlaw and Clashmore Kinsale Beg. And the quarter-final draw is the Nair v Bricky Rangers, Rathgormack v Portlaw, Galtier v Clashmore and Ballinacorty v Kilrosanti. And just speaking of Ballinacorty, or I should say Ballymacarby, who are obviously dominant in Waterford, had a big win over their Cork rivals Mourneabbey in the Munster Ladies Football Championship. This is the first time they've beaten them in a long, long time. It finished 3-7 to 7. Ballymac had previously lost their last 4 meetings to the Cork side, who were seeking their 8th Munster title in a row. Mourneabbey were beaten in the All-Ireland Club final earlier on this year. So that by Kilkerrin and Clonberne. So that is a big upset. They clashed in 4 provincial finals between 2015 and 2019, with Mourneabbey emerging victorious every time. And in Meath, Dunboyne secured their 3rd county title in a row, despite the absence of Vicky Wall. They beat Dunshaughlin Gaels 113 to 110. Emma Duggan, outstanding yet again. And I think I have left out one county. The one county I've left out is the Wicklow final, which I was at yesterday. Loads of drama there. It finished St. Patrick's 110, Baltinglass 1-8. Baltinglass made all the running at the start of this game with the wind at their back. John McGrath got a goal after 7 minutes. They should have had a goal 2 minutes later. It hit the post. They were 1-3 to no score up at the end of the first quarter, and they probably should have been out of sight. But St. Pat's gradually got into the game with Paddy O'Kane at centre back and Dean Healy, really, really good for them. And they eventually got a bit of a foothold with 3 Tommy Kelly frees, meaning they only trailed by 4 at the break. They started the second half really, really strong, and Tommy Kelly got you could call it fortuitous, you could call it opportunistic, you could call it downright lucky. It looked like he got away with a push in the build-up to the goal. Tommy K, they call him. I know Tommy K, the DJ, after the famous song. But he was the difference maker, really. He kicked 1-5, 4 frees, and that crucial goal. And Paddy Podge McWalter, at 38 years young, absolutely dictated affairs for Pats at centre forward, an absolutely brilliant display. That secured their 15th county title, and I'm sure they'll be celebrating in Wicklow Town for a long, long time to come. I'll just fly through a couple of quick comments before we finish up here. Mullinyochta, Jack 2022 says Mullinyochta had it won, but great Bach in Little Old Star. Declan Riley, obviously, he won the penalty. And Jack also says story of the weekend has to be Luke Loughlin and the Downs winning, or one of the stories, a huge win for the Downs, definitely, without a doubt. And something I neglected to say there, Michael Davitt just mentions Niall Mitchell, the Westmeath hurler, a class act for the Downs yesterday. He was man of the match. Heard he absolutely dictated affairs. And that was coming after the disappointment of losing a county final for Clonkill the week before. Porter, Derry Gonley and Fermanagh loss was definitely an upset. That was a massive upset. And Jack 2022 says, man of the match, Luke Loughlin, good. But Niall Mitchell, he says, man of the match. He just says Luke Loughlin's story and his struggle with addiction. And now the Tailteann Cup and the county final win all in the 1 year. Definitely a great story there. Jack 22 also says East Kerry, if he's thinking not on TV, is a scandal. Surprised as well. I'm surprised at that, being honest with you, given the star power of, Paul Gainey up against David Clifford. But there's loads of brilliant games to look forward to next weekend. Joe Butler says, well done, Michael, good show. I think I'm going to need a break after this show. I probably won't get one, but I'm going to need a break. Thanks a million, everybody, for joining us once again. Another jam-packed show. Hopefully, Shane will be back on Thursday. Hopefully, he'll be over. He'll have the cooler hangover out of the way. But thanks a million for everyone for joining us. Show sponsored, as always, by orgoretro.com. Go to orgoretro.com, use the promo code OurGame to get 15% off, the best jerseys in the business. Thanks a million for joining us, folks, and we'll see you all on Thursday for the preview show. Thanks very much.